11,700 years ago, the world got warmer, and almost everything large died. The woolly mammoth, the woolly rhinoceros, the cave lion, the cave bear, the cave hyena, the Irish elk, carrying antlers 3.5 meters across, the short-faced bear, which stood 4 meters tall on its hind legs, and could outrun a horse, Glyptodon, an armored mammal the size of a small car, Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat. Across the northern hemisphere, roughly 2/3 of all large mammal species vanished, not in a single afternoon, not from a meteor, but in a window so narrow that, on a geological timescale, it looks instantaneous. We still argue about why. A warming climate that tore their habitats apart. A newly arrived predator, walking upright, carrying stone-tipped spears, probably both, feeding into each other. And the ending was stranger than the textbooks suggest. The mammoth did not vanish cleanly. On Wrangel Island, a scrap of land off the coast of Siberia, a small isolated population held on for thousands of years after the mainland herds were gone. They were still alive when the Great Pyramid at Giza was being built. Somewhere around 4,000 years ago, while humans were riding, farming, forging bronze and burying kings, the last mammoths on Earth were still walking around on a cold island in the Arctic Ocean. And then they stopped. That is how recent this is. The Ice Age is not a distant chapter. It is the room next door. But this is not a film about the animals that died. Because when the ice pulled back and the great herds collapsed, a handful of species did not disappear. They are still here. Right now, as you watch this, there are animals walking around on this planet that watched the mammoths die. They are not fossils. They are not reconstructions. They are living fragments of the Pleistocene. And every one of them survived by breaking a different rule. This is how they did it. Begin with the one that refused to run. The muskox does not look like it belongs in this century, and in a sense it doesn't. It is a relic, a survivor of the mammoth steppe, that vast cold grassland that once stretched unbroken from Spain to Canada. Everything else that grazed there is gone. The muskox stayed. It weighs up to 400 kilograms. It stands barely 1.5 meters at the shoulder. And it is wrapped in the warmest natural fiber on Earth. Beneath its shaggy outer coat lies a layer called kivyut, an undercoat so fine and so dense that it insulates roughly 8 times better than sheep's wool, while weighing almost nothing. A muskox sheds it in sheets every spring. It does not need to burn energy staying warm, which matters enormously when your food is frozen moss and the sun does not rise for months. But insulation is not the interesting part. The interesting part is what a muskox does when it is attacked. Almost every large herbivore on Earth runs. It is the default answer, written deep into the nervous system. See a predator, create distance. The muskox does the opposite. When wolves close in, the herd stops. The adults turn outward and form a circle, or a line if the ground is against them, with the calves pressed into the center. Horns face the threat, and then they simply stand there. Against wolves, this works extraordinarily well. A wall of horn and bone with no exposed flank is a problem a wolf pack cannot solve. They circle, they test, they wait, and usually they leave. Against a human with a rifle, it is the worst possible response. An entire herd, standing still, refusing to scatter. By the 1920s, the muskox had been shot out of Alaska completely. Gone. The species survived only because populations held on in Greenland and the Canadian Arctic, and because animals were later shipped back and released onto the tundra they had been erased from. The muskox outlasted the Ice Age, outlasted the cave lion, outlasted the mammoth, and then very nearly lost to us in under a century. Its strategy was to hold ground. The next survivor chose the exact opposite. The reindeer never stops. Across Eurasia and North America, where it is called caribou, this animal performs the longest overland migration of any land mammal alive. Certain herds cover more than 5,000 kilometers in a single year, moving in columns tens of thousands strong, following the retreat and return of the snow. That constant motion is not restlessness, it is the whole strategy. When the climate shifted and habitats fractured into patches, animals that were locked to one place starved. The reindeer was already built to leave. Its body is a catalog of small, ruthless solutions to cold. The hooves change with the seasons, spongy in summer for wet tundra, hardening in winter into sharp rims that cut through ice, and shovel snow aside to reach the lichen buried underneath. Its nose is a heat exchanger, warming freezing air before it reaches the lungs and reclaiming moisture on the way out. And then there is the eye. Reindeer can see ultraviolet light. Almost no mammal can. Our own lenses block it. But in the Arctic winter, under that long blue twilight, ultraviolet is most of the light there is. Snow reflects it almost perfectly. Lichen absorbs it, fur absorbs it, urine absorbs it. So to a reindeer, a white landscape is not empty. Lichen shows up as dark patches against glowing snow. A wolf, whose fur soaks up UV, stops being camouflaged and becomes a black shape crossing a bright field. Their eyes even change structure between seasons. The reflective layer behind the retina shifts color from gold in summer to deep blue in winter, scattering light inside the eye to squeeze more sensitivity out of the dark. Hold ground, or keep moving. Both worked. The third survivor tried something stranger. On the dry steppe of Kazakhstan and Mongolia lives an animal that looks assembled from spare parts. The saiga antelope has an enormous, drooping, downturned nose, a fleshy proboscis that hangs over its mouth and looks, frankly, absurd. It is not absurd, it is a survival organ. That oversized nasal chamber filters the dust thrown up by a running herd in summer, and in winter, it warms sub-zero air before it reaches the lungs. On the open steppe, where there is no shelter of any kind, and the temperature swings between 40 above and 40 below, breathing itself is a problem that must be engineered around. The saiga's other answer is speed and numbers. They can run at 80 kilometers an hour. They calve in tight synchrony. A huge share of the entire population born within about a week, flooding the predators with more newborns than they can possibly take. That strategy carried them through the end of the Pleistocene, when they ranged from Britain to Alaska. Then, in May 2015, something went wrong. In central Kazakhstan, saiga began dying. Not a few, entire calving herds, mothers and newborns together, collapsing across the steppe within days of each other. In roughly 3 weeks, more than 200,000 animals died. Some herds lost close to 90%. It remains one of the fastest mass mortality events ever recorded in a large mammal. The cause was a bacterium called Pastorella multocida. It lives harmlessly in the tonsils of healthy saiga. It had been there all along. What changed was the weather. Unusually high humidity and unusual warmth in those particular weeks appear to have flipped a resident, harmless organism into something that entered the bloodstream and killed within hours. An animal that survived the collapse of the mammoth steppe was brought to the edge in 3 weeks by a warm, wet spring. Remember that. We will come back to it. The fourth survivor took the opposite path from the muskox. Instead of getting bigger and better insulated, it got smaller and gave up everything it did not absolutely need. The Arctic fox is a masterpiece of subtraction. Short legs, short muzzle, small rounded ears buried in fur. Every projection that could leak heat has been shortened or padded, the same principle that shapes the ears of a desert fox in reverse. Even the soles of its feet are furred. The result is an animal that can sit in air at minus 40 degrees Celsius and not raise its metabolic rate at all. It is not enduring that cold. It is comfortable in it. No other mammal on Earth tolerates cold that well without burning extra fuel. Its coat rebuilds itself twice a year, thick and white in winter, thin and brown in summer, so completely that the animal appears to change species. And because food on the tundra is not merely scarce but wildly unpredictable, the Arctic fox hoards. It buries eggs, birds, and lemmings in the permafrost, which functions as a freezer that does not fail, and returns months later. When the lemming population crashes, as it does on a brutal 3 to 4 year cycle, foxes walk. They will cross hundreds of kilometers of sea ice. They follow polar bears at a careful distance, living on what is left of a seal. It is not a strategy built on strength. It is built on wasting nothing, which brings us to the animal that made its living from the dead. The wolverine is not large. A big male reaches perhaps 25 kilograms, the size of a medium dog. Its reputation for ferocity is mostly earned, but ferocity is not why it survived the Ice Age. It survived because it solved a problem no one else wanted. In a frozen world, there is meat everywhere. Animals die constantly in winter, and their bodies do not rot. They freeze solid. That is an enormous larder, and almost nothing can open it, because frozen muscle and bone are closer to timber than to food. The wolverine can. Its skull and jaw muscles are disproportionately heavy, and in the upper jaw it carries a molar, rotated 90 degrees inward, turned sideways specifically to crack and shear frozen flesh and bone. It will travel astonishing distances to find carrion, with home ranges that can exceed 1,000 square kilometers for a single animal. And it depends on snow absolutely. Female wolverines dig dens into deep snowpack, tunnels and chambers under a meter or more of it, and they require that snow to persist into the middle of May, long enough to raise the kits. No deep spring snow, no wolverines. Hold the ground, keep moving, filter the air, waste nothing, eat the frozen dead. 5 different answers to the same question, all of them correct. There was no single trick to surviving the end of the Ice Age. But look at what the survivors have in common, and a pattern does appear, an uncomfortable one. Not one of them is a giant. The muskox is the largest on this list, and a muskox would have looked small beside a mammoth, a woolly rhinoceros, or a short-faced bear. Being enormous had been the winning move for 2 million years. When the world changed, it became the fastest way to die. Large animals need more food, breed more slowly, recover from losses over generations rather than seasons, and they are worth far more to a hunter than a fox is. Size was not protection, size was the liability. But there is a 6th story, and it is the one that should worry us. The American bison survived the Pleistocene extinction comprehensively. Its relatives, the steppe bison, the long-horned bison, died. It did not. By the time Europeans reached the Great Plains, bison numbered somewhere between 30 and 60 million animals. It was, by weight, one of the largest concentrations of wild mammals that has ever existed anywhere on Earth. By 1889, there were fewer than 600 left. Not from climate, not from disease. From roughly 50 years of industrial commercial hunting, hides shipped east by rail, and a deliberate policy of destroying the herds that the Plains nations depended on. An animal that walked through an extinction event that erased the mammoth was reduced by more than 99.9% inside a single human lifetime. It survives today because a handful of people, at the last possible moment, decided it should, and that is the pattern underneath all 6 of these animals. Every one of them is a specialist in cold. That is precisely what saved them. When the ice retreated north, they were able to retreat with it, into a shrinking band of tundra and steppe and snow that still resembled the world they were built for. Which means the Ice Age never really ended. It withdrew. It is still up there, at the top of the map, holding on, and it is still withdrawing. The wolverine needs deep snow in May, and the line where deep snow survives into May is moving north every decade. The saiga was pushed to the edge by a single warm, humid spring. Caribou herds across the Arctic have fallen sharply. Several of the largest have lost the majority of their animals in a few decades, and the red fox, a temperate animal, is walking north into Arctic fox territory as the tundra warms. It is larger, it is stronger. Where the two meet, it kills the Arctic fox, or simply takes the den and drives it out. These animals did not survive because they were tough. Toughness did not save the mammoth. They survived because the specific world they were adapted to did not entirely disappear. It only got smaller, and it went north, and they followed it. That world is now smaller than it has been at any point since the extinction they lived through. So when you see a muskox standing in a line on the tundra, horns out, refusing to move, understand what you are actually looking at. Not a curiosity, not something that resembles the Ice Age. The Ice Age itself, still standing there, still refusing to run, for now.